Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to the A24 project here on the Nerd Party. I'm your host, Dallas King, and today we're live from New York. It's Saturday night, Monday morning, as we're joined by professional game master Timm Woods to talk about everything RPG, D&D, and the Green Knight role-playing game, which he had a hand in creating for A24. Hope you enjoy this latest interview, and we'll see you soon. Enjoy. Tim, what exactly is a professional game master?
Absolutely. It's definitely a common question that I get, but basically what I do is obviously for people who play role-playing games, there is the role of the game master. Then in a lot of RPGs, you need to have somebody kind of filling that role. And the main difference I always say is that I will run games for people I don't know necessarily. And my experience with role-playing games is that unless you have that friend already kind of in your friend group, someone who will introduce you to role-playing games, a lot of people who want to play role-playing games kind of feel a little bit left out of the hobby to some degree or another because they don't have that friend. And very often I'm kind of facilitating that role of being somebody who's both running the game for you, but also kind of introducing you to the concepts of the game, teaching you the rules in a kind of patient step-by-step way that also doesn't like front load too much or overwhelm you with information before you're playing. I kind of like to really sell that first session when people might not be as familiar with the rules or the concepts of D&D. And basically people can bring me in to run birthday parties, special events, or for a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly game or something like that. But I do run games like Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games professionally for as my kind of full-time work right now.
Full-time, excellent. So yeah, the game master thing is sort of encompassing all sort of RPGs, because sort of dungeon master is, I guess, sort of specifically relating to the world of D&D, isn't it?
Exactly right. In theory, I'm a professional game master because I can run lots of different role-playing games, but in practice, I very often am running Dungeons and Dragons as a dungeon master. So I'd say well over 95% of the work I do is just running Dungeons and Dragons, but at the same time, I do run I know a lot of other games and can run them and often run them for fun for my friends and stuff, but only occasionally do I get asked to run something like, say, Call of Cthulhu, the horror RPG, or something like that for special events.
Okay, cool. Because yeah, no, I mean, Dungeons and Dragons wasn't something I sort of grew up playing, but I've sort of gotten into it recently, and there was a group of friends who wanted to give it a go, and so I sort of had to take on the role of dungeon master, and I can appreciate why people might be a little hesitant to get into that role, because it is quite a big responsibility, isn't it?
It's a huge responsibility, and kudos to you for tackling that without, like, you obviously you're saying you had some experience, but as you're also highlighting, it can be very overwhelming when you're kind of in the driver's seat like that. And I always say a good description of dungeon mastering is like you're telling everybody, hey, if you listen to me, you'll have a fun night, as opposed to we could just hang out and have a good time. It's a big like proclamation to make, and it's very intimidating to then feel the obligation on yourself to deliver on the fun and being knowledgeable with the rules. There's a lot that falls on the dungeon master's shoulders, and not all of it is visible to the people who are having a good time who are playing. Sort of the magic trick to it to a certain degree also.
Yeah, because it's like when we do it, it's like my wife's like, oh, do you know, no, we're just gonna hang out and have fun and stuff like that. And it's like, well, it's not as simple as that, because I do need to spend some time sort of coming up with ideas and stuff. And I mean, there's just so much lore and rules and stuff that you need to do, and it's like just sort of getting started. We've played like a few missions, but you want to make it fun for everyone by sort of building up the story and the character and stuff, but then you're also almost spending half the time trying to consult different books, and there's now apps which kind of make it easier. You can quickly type in the thing you're looking for and bring it up, but otherwise you're scrolling through pages and pages and stuff. So I mean, how do you go about
100%.
how would you go about sort of setting up just a standard game for someone? Someone says, Tim, we want you to come along, we want to learn D&D. I mean, what sort of work do you put into the back end of it before the people are around the table and stuff like that.
Absolutely. As you're highlighting, there's a ton of prep that you can do for Dungeons and Dragons, and I always argue there's no limit to the prep you can do. If you allow yourself to feel the obligations of like, well, I could know more about the lore of this particular detail, there's an infinite amount of preparation you could do in theory. And I've discovered the easy way sometimes and other times the hard way, that there is a limit on how much prep you should do, maybe both for keeping the game exciting and allowing for improvisation, but also just because there's constraints in the day. There's only so much time definitely that I can dedicate to any one given game. So I do generally, if somebody comes out to me saying, I want to play D&D, I'd love to, ask you to come in and run a game for me. Generally in those instances, I do have kind of a pre-structured adventure that I run for, like, to me it's like the perfect one shot. If all they're going to do is play this 1 3-hour game of D&D, then here's what I would want to deliver. And it tends to be something that I like to describe it as like D&D brought to you by Michael Bay or something. There's a lot of explosions, a lot of action. You dive right into like combat right away, kind of. So it's less the methodical, thoughtful dungeon crawl. Very often, if I'm given only 3 hours, I want to deliver the D&D experience to people who might not know what that is. And that means picking up the pace, being a little dynamic, and definitely, as you're kind of highlighting, rules, knowing rules beforehand. I'm lucky that I've run so many games of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons now at this point. I do have a lot of the rules, especially for like levels 1 through 7, pretty much memorized. But I don't think that's an easy thing to accomplish for anybody. I consider myself in a very fortunate position where I can run so many games that I kind of get it down to a lot of routine and can therefore move my games a little quickly. There's not as much interruption for looking up a rule. And if I don't know a rule, we would never spend time in one of my games looking it up. I will always like err in favor of the players if I can, because at that point and it's tricky when it's with friends and stuff, because you want to get the rules right. And if you don't get them right the first time, it can be really annoying to go back and have to like fix it afterward, kind of situation. But at the same time, flipping through the rule books, it's such a classic, well-known thing in D&D where it's like, this is what always brings D&D games to a halt. So anytime I can avoid having to do that, unless there are situations where it's almost like, ooh, let's look up the rule and the tension builds. But other than that, it is the kind of thing where my preparation that I do beforehand, I generally try to streamline it whenever possible and run those kind of like adventures that I've run many times before that I know very well to help with that. But otherwise, I'm probably, for any new session with a steady group where it's content I haven't run before, I'm spending at least half of the time that I spend running the game prepping for the game. Usually it's a 1-to-1 ratio, more or less, but I've gotten a little bit better at streamlining some of my process. I've gotten a little more familiar with things I don't have to look up as often, and so that's helped. But at the same time, I'm always doing prep, especially for games where it is a group that's been doing a steady campaign with me and needs to, I'm pioneering some new chapter of an adventure that I haven't necessarily run before.
Okay, cool. Because I mean, is that the reason why the Dungeon Master screen was essentially created? Was it to basically hide the fact that the DM was flicking through a book or something trying to find the rules?
There's definitely the idea that like you don't want to know like what rules you're looking up and stuff. I always think of the joke that the game master wants people to think that they have a lot of notes behind their game master screen, and that in reality what the joke was something like there's just one post-it note that says sexy goblin, and like that's all that like. So I think there's the creating the illusion of I know all the rules, the illusion of I like know what I'm doing back here, but also I always hear that the dungeon master screen is there for the dungeon master to show mercy. So when he rolls a critical hit and there's only one player left, they can be like, oh, what do you know, a 1, like yeah, the monster did real bad this time, and can kind of spare, it can fudge rolls, as it's typically called, I think. But one thing that I guess I do a little differently than other dungeon masters is just do the physical logistics of the table. I generally don't often have a DM screen, and one thing that has kind of emerged out of as a corollary of that is I don't fudge fudge rolls, and players know they see my rolls happen in front of them, and they see my face like, no, I didn't want that to happen. I'm sorry, everybody, but that's like kind of the game is, I'm on your side until I'm not on your side, as it were. So they can kind of see. I think it helps when they see my dice rolls as well as their dice rolls to get a cohesive idea of what is the relationship and how do the rules work on both sides of the table.
Okay, so I mean, is it tough to keep a poker face then? Because I guess if you've got sort of games sort of mapped out in your head, it's like if characters are sort of diverting maybe down another path where you were thinking, actually, I really want them to do this. It's like, are you sort of able to steer them back round, or is it kind of given away in your face about what's happening?
I would have to say that number one, for starters, I have a terrible poker face. And in my experience, I think my groups kind of love it when they're like, oh, okay, I could go for this door or that really cool looking door. And I'm like leaning in and they're like, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Like how you're responding, everything about your body language is telling me not to open the door, but now I kind of want to. I think players have a lot of fun with that. But I do have to admit that when I hear a player coming up with an idea that like either completely subverts like a puzzle I had and they're like, oh, what if we just walk around it? And I'm like, oh, I never thought of that. Or like something like that. That's where I do feel obligated. I'm like, I got to have a real good poker face because I'm like, sure, yeah, that's fine. That's great. And meanwhile, I'm like, do I have enough content planned out to fill up the next 3 hours? I usually do. I always try to plan like a little bit of extra just in case. But like there's definitely times when I'm sweating and I'm hoping nobody's noticing me sweating, because very often even my players I experience, and it's very common at the table, I think one of the best things is when GMs are communicating with players and kind of being honest, especially when it's your friends, being like, I'll be honest, everybody, I didn't have this quite planned out. I kind of expect this to go a little differently. I think that's great to do, but definitely when I'm delivering a professional experience, I don't want people to worry about what I have planned or haven't planned. I want people to just play the way they want to play. But there's definitely times when that has put me on the hot seat, and I want to make sure that like, oh, I hope if they do the thing they want to do, that I'm still delivering on that good experience.
Okay, cool. You've mentioned there that you have like this standard sort of 3 hour game process, but I mean that's sort of for like a one-off one shot thing. But I mean, what's the sort of longest sort of campaign that you've been a part of, either as dungeon master or just playing?
Absolutely. I would ask, do you mean like a single session that we've sat down for, or a campaign where we've been returning for sessions over the course of weeks or
I'd say like a campaign that's sort of like taken like several sessions. I mean, what's the longest one that's gone on for?
I think I'm good. The first answer I'll give is going to resonate with a lot of RPG players, which is that technically the longest campaign I still have running is like the campaign I started with my brother when we were like, teenagers. And like technically that campaign is still like hanging out somewhere. And like we, talk about how we, would we continue it? Would we, we have so many other ideas that we want to run and campaigns we're running right now that it's, unlikely we would return to any of our ideas necessarily with expedience or speed, but games that are on hiatus, if you count those, then yeah, I've got games that have been running easily for decades. But in terms of the professional games I've run exclusively, I have had one game now that is, if it's not entering its fourth year. If it's not in its fourth year, it's entering its fourth year, I would say, very soon. And so that professional game is the one I've had running the longest. They've actually been 20th level for like the better part of like months now at this point. But we're getting to the boss battle, but the final dungeon that we're going through has been a lot of fun. So it's been going on for a prolonged period. But I've definitely had campaigns that have gone on for years. And now I kind of think of like a full campaign getting to level 20 is maybe taking, somewhere between 2 to 4 years usually. Obviously some people do campaigns quicker. Most campaigns never reach, 20th level, never reach that final end of the arc, as it were. Most peter out before then, but I do, try to deliver like a full story whenever I can.
Okay, great. You said that you sort of started campaigns with your brother and stuff like that. When did you sort of first get into sort of D&D and gaming?
Absolutely. I remember vividly being something like 10, 11, or 12 years old, probably 12, where I had gone online in the early days of the internet and found these PDF documents of this game called Dungeons and Dragons, where you could play this solo adventure. And if that, I think this is a great example of like my business and other ways that people create access points for people to get into the hobby. If there hadn't been a solo adventure that I could play on my own to get me hyped to introduce this to my brother, who then like we would pressure our sisters into playing until they were like, actually, like we definitely don't want to play, or we do want to give it a try on our terms. And like we started being a little more like definitely getting thoughtful about how do I approach people about the game. But I only got into it because of having this solo adventure to kind of look through. And it was this moment, I like to compare it to probably what kids nowadays, I say nowadays, but like Minecraft is not actually nowadays right now. I must confess, I realize this having taught many kids groups. So, but I will say for one generation, Minecraft or Legos would also be analogous. The moment when you like click two blocks together and you go, oh, I can make anything with this. And all of a sudden the possibilities just kind of fractal spiral away from your mind. But it was this moment where I remember reading like, well, if the rat is attacking Thaddeus the wizard, then they have an easy time compared to if they're attacking the fighter who has better armor. This just gives you an idea of like how some of the rules work in D&D. And I'm like, oh, so you could be anyone. And you could be doing anything. Oh, like this isn't a game about going into a tower and killing some rats. It's a game about whatever you want it to be. It's just modular enough that you can decide what that means. It's a storytelling engine. And once I realized that, that was the moment when I was like my breath was taken away, realizing what the possibilities for a tool like this were. And the fact that it had been around for so long, and I had been around like early computers and things like that, and like I had never come across early PC gaming, I should say, is really what I was growing up around, and not having known that this other kind of procedural gameplay was kind of out there that had been the foundations to all the games that I knew and loved.
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't realize there was actually solo adventures for D&D. It sounds very much like when I was growing up, there were the sort of choose your own adventure books where you'd get to the end of a chapter and it'd say, if you want to go down this path, go to this page and whatever. And people would always sort of read through, but then sort of keep their thumb on the page and it's like, and sort of flick out and go, oh no, I don't want to go down there. I'm going to go back and I'm going to go the other way, and sort of cheating their own story and stuff like that. So
100%. The solo adventure I found was very much like that, but it was like you could do your dice rolls on your own and lie about them if you wanted to. But it was this interesting idea of like, what if you keep it honest? What if you like force yourself to go? And of course, realizing that if you had other players, that's kind of how the structure of a game like D&D works. So it was very interesting. Yeah. But the choose your own adventure books were definitely, I grew up with those, and those were very foundational to me even understanding probably what D&D was.
yeah. Have you ever watched the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon series that was on in the 80s?
I'll confess I never probably have sat down and watched a full episode of it, but at the same time, I do know that I remember watching most of the first episode online at some point and realizing like the notion that it was like modern kids who had been transported. It, like I kind of knew of the gist of the story, as it were, but also like even at the point when I picked up D&D, it was like I understood the references they were making, but it wasn't the same rule set even at that point. So it was actually very hilarious. And the idea of that being the dungeon master, like a little like short like Yoda looking guy, I was like, this is amazing. This is so much fun.
Yeah,
I grew up with Thundercats and Space Ghosts, so I
okay,
definitely
yeah.
felt like it was something where I understood what had created it for sure.
I remember like seeing a lot of the episodes when I was growing up, but I had it in my head that I'm not sure if it was cancelled or at some point, whatever, but I'm pretty sure there was like a really sort of depressing thing where it never got to the end of the campaign, and basically the kids never got out of their little world or something like that, and it always
They
just
were
seemed like
trapped in the D&D world. That would make complete sense. I'd be very surprised if they got to a satisfying conclusion of the D&D cartoon, as it were. I remember knowing, even when I first discovered it, that I was like, this is so cool that this exists. I have no problem with it, but I don't know if this is necessarily a good representation or if this is necessarily made for fans of D&D or not. It was the kind of thing where I'm like, like, okay, yeah, I understand that this exists, but I'm not sure how familiar with the creators of this are with like D&D itself.
Yeah. I'm sort of keen to know a bit about your background and sort of education and how you've used gaming in that, and you've even sort of written you've now got a doctorate, a PhD in sort of looking at gaming and education and how the two can work together. Could you sort of tell us a bit about that and how that all came about?
Absolutely. I mean, as I'm saying, I kind of like grew up with these games. Gaming was something that I was very interested in, and interested in the ways that like people approached it. Why do people start to, play games and then identify as gamers? Why do some people not? And like the ways that games are used by different people for different purposes. So as I studied more and more, I kind of like was like, okay, I want to write my dissertation on something that I'm interested in. So let me explore different things about gaming. But the more I looked at different games, and especially the history of games, and specifically the history of RPGs, I became fascinated by this idea that I didn't just think games were educational. There was so much evidence that games have this history and emerged in our culture as this codified form of education, that as they became more popular, we actually as a culture collectively started being like, whoa, hold on. Okay, games have to be something different. Training will stay what we have made games as, but now we're going to start using the word game to apply specifically to what kids are doing. Why? Because games are so fun and people want to do them for fun now. And it was when games started being understood to have this mass appeal that they started making the shift from being used as like mostly military training for some degree. When we talk about the games that D&D emerged from, we can see a pretty firm line emerging from wargaming. But when you look at what wargaming was, it was like, well, we're doing this to train, to learn politics, to learn military strategies. And then the more like modern games they became, the more fun they became. And the more fun they became, the more people were like, well, who cares whether we're soldiers or not? I just want to play the Kriegspiel now. I want to do this. And that was when it kind of made the shift into being like, well, now it's not as serious. Now it's for kids. But these games all emerged as ways to knowledge share and ways to assess. And they have this intensely entangled emergence with education. And now we I argue, have this very firm idea in our society that there's like work and play. But when you look at why people play, both children play in order to like learn more effectively, and that is how they learn most effectively, is through play. But even as adults, like we're generally very often playing as opposed to relaxing in order to like work with our brains in different ways, and the motives we have to play very often intersync with this idea of adult education and how challenged we feel sometimes. We play in order to maybe challenge ourselves in different ways in low stakes environments. And I just found it fascinating, the idea that when we talk about the perfect classroom compared and contrasted to the perfect tabletop gaming environment, there's a lot of weird similarities. Actually, there's a lot of weird similarities in best methods when it comes to game mastering and best methods when it comes to teaching, and the ways that game mastering kind of the space of the game table is like creating a space for like critical thinking. I'm not going to tell you what to ask me whatever you want, and as I give you more information about the situation at hand, maybe new questions will emerge, maybe courses of action will become clear. And you look back at military training about like even just survival strategy, like hypotheticals and stuff, riddles, all these things are rooted in this kind of like educational aspect to some degree in communicating ideas. So I became very fascinated in this. I got to run some classrooms at my university at St. John's where I was kind of using RPGs as a way to teach introductory writing classes. When you're talking about trying to get students engaged as the biggest problem in some of these classrooms, I argued very much that games are like the solution. If you're looking for a solution, and engagement is what you're trying to solve, then games might be the answer you're looking for. And that was a lot of what I ended up writing about.
Fascinating, yeah. And I guess it can work, I guess, for all sorts of age groups. You can teach the sort of creating writing with aspects, but then with sort of younger kids, I guess, with something like D&D, you've got sort of teaching a sort of teamwork. You can learn sort of different skills. You've got the especially we'll get onto it with the Green Knight one, sort of like honor and stuff like that, and being a good person and versus good and evil and all. So you can sort of bring all that sort of stuff, and I guess not trick them, so to speak, but certainly get them to. I guess you're teaching them without them realizing what they're actually sort of learning almost, and
Sometimes it's like slipping it in, as it were, but at the same time my argument would be people want to learn more than we realize people want to learn, and when we aren't able to learn and to engage our mind in that way, that's when we start to play. And it's either through games or it's through more subtle things, ways that we play outside of defined game spaces, but we use our brains all the time to do that, and if we don't get the opportunities to, that's I think what kind of pushes us towards. So if you look at gaming as a kind of learning, then it's like, well, the fact that they want to do it makes it feel like a trick. Inarguably, yes, but it's kind of like, well, why do you? If you look at the real motives, very often gaming isn't stress-free. It's creating a bunch of problems for you that you have to solve your way through. Why do our brains like doing that? That's a very interesting set of questions. Yeah. And as you're saying, with different age groups, what I loved was it was so obvious how games work with kids in education, because we do that in a very official ways very often. But I was really excited that my professors were so interested in this idea of adult education and how gaming intersects with that. The idea that adults might be very interested in these games because it gives them an opportunity to learn, critical think, and engage their brains in the ways that gaming do, in ways that they might not get to in other situations. And at the same time, that is what's making it so much fun.
Yeah, and certainly when I was growing up, sort of like the late 80s, early 90s, I think we had like Spectrums, and then it was the SNES, but me and my friends were still sort of doing sort of the gaming. Like I think Magic the Gathering was just coming out at that sort of time, so we had that. Yeah, the Warhammers, Games Workshops, Blood Bowl, and stuff like that. But then certainly sort of later generations was, I think, basically when you look at like when the PlayStations and stuff came out, there was a huge shift towards video gaming and stuff like that. But there has been a sort of a shift back now. I don't want to lump all the praise on it's not all down to Stranger Things, clearly, but it has sort of certainly put it into the sort of popular consciousness. But I mean, you've had like people like Vin Diesel and stuff sort of saying, that their players and stuff like that. And I was at a Comic Con in London 2 years ago, and there was this group there called Critical Role, and I'd never heard of them before, but you could not get into the main stage area because it was oversubscribed with people. They were treated like rock stars, and I was like, okay, what is this? And it's sort of going on, and basically this group that were sort of live streaming their gaming and stuff like that. And it's like, it's amazing how big it's come. I mean, have you seen it since you've been playing all this time? But did you notice like the wave of popularity and basically you getting more and more gigs out of people wanting to start learning it? I mean, was it around the time that sort of Stranger Things was coming in, or was there a gradual shift before that?
I'd argue all three of the things you're saying, both it all kind of work together in one way or another. The rise of video games, definitely, I think maybe there was like a slight movement away at first, but I think the rise of video games making gaming mainstream only made board games and tabletop games surge in popularity. There was this kind of push back away from screens, in my experience, that led to the rise of things like the board game cafe in major cities, where that's a lot of how I got my start, was through board game cafes of a variety in New York City. And then just the fact that people were like, well, I've played Divinity Original Sin, I've played like all these RPGs, maybe I've never even heard of D&D, but I'm interested now because I've played so many video games and I want to do something with my friends that maybe doesn't involve screens as much. And very often board games will occur first, but then they'll be looking for the tabletop role-playing games for sure. And then Stranger Things came along, and I think it pretty much like I think of it as like the door of stigma against nerdy things was hanging by one hinge, and Stranger Things just kicked the door down and sent it flying like through the back wall, basically. And it was just like, this is the coolest, actually. Like it just was such an about face where the last people who were like, D&D, is that actually nerdy? I'm not sure. And they're like, no, actually it is nerdy, but now it's cool like everything else nerdy. So I definitely think Stranger Things made a lot of people who were kind of the last holdouts who would have thought like, ooh, I am curious about D&D, but it's not for me. They stopped thinking that immediately, I think, after Stranger Things. And now Critical Role, you're highlighting them, they are easily the biggest phenomenon happening. The biggest single phenomenon happening in Dungeons and Dragons today, without a doubt, is the fact that Critical Role just kickstarted their D&D TV show. They have a show that they've been doing, but now they will have, thanks to their $11 million Kickstarter, they're going to have an animated show that is going to appear, I think, on Amazon. And now when that gets released in, however long, however many years, when it comes out, I think we are going to see the scope of role-playing games change radically after that. After a million or more people tune in to a cartoon based off of somebody's Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and it's quality stuff. I have finally over the quarantine started listening to Critical Role, and I'm like, damn, I'm a fan. They got me good. And so I do think that when that releases to the mainstream, I think we will suddenly see people's perception. I think we'll see D&D like become comparable to a video game spectatorship in terms of like as its own thing, in terms of people being interested in this hobby, as it were. And similar relationship, Critical Role has allowed people to kind of tune in more than anything to my business. The shift it made is people tune into Critical Role, they realize, holy crap, I love D&D, I had no idea. People say D&D doesn't have compared to like a sport like baseball, where you don't try to line up 9 people against 9 people on someone's first game of baseball. You play catch with somebody. You start by doing something simple that introduces people to a sport. People say D&D doesn't have its version of catch. You can't just sit down and it's character creation. And character creation is not exciting for somebody who doesn't know D&D. That's one of the horrible secrets of D&D, is like sitting down and trying to be like, oh, it'll be fun. You get to make a character. Parts of that are fun. Some parts of that are fun, but most of the time you'll alienate people trying to teach them D&D before they're sitting down at the table. And things like Critical Role are the catch of D&D. They allow people to sit down and be like, oh, I would love D&D. And then those people specifically don't always have someone who can run the game for them. So a lot of people who have become fans of Critical Role then do seek me out, or they'll follow one of my games on, that I've put up online or on Barstool Sports or something like that, where they've seen me run and game, and that's where they come and reach out to me afterward, realizing like, oh, I thought I hated D&D. Turns out this is exactly up my alley.
Yeah. And so, I mean, so looking at lockdown now, where we currently are, I mean, I'm interested to sort of get your perspective on how that sort of changed your model of business. Because I mean, I've been, one of my hobbies over lockdown has been sort of sourcing old board games, particularly ones based on movies. So I've got like an Escape from New York one from the 80s, Alien, Dune, Twin Peaks, and stuff like that. And well, I have to
That's
say,
gotta be fun. I love that.
it is fun, but I have to say that, I think a lot of these games were kind of made independently of the people making the film, and so therefore the gameplay is quite simple and maybe doesn't always match up. But the annoying thing I find with some of them is that, for me and my wife, yeah, great 2-player game, but a lot of these are for like 4 players or more, and you're like, oh, right. And a board game is not suitable for Zoom, because not every you would basically need 4 copies of the game and everyone to be able to try and match up. Chess or something is easy because if you've got 2, in Blade Runner, there's that famous scene where Tyrell and Sebastian are playing chess against each other. But D&D is also almost by accident tailor-made for something like Zoom, because you don't need like the physical board in front of you. You can be in different locations but still manage to do it. I mean, we did it a couple of times over Zoom and stuff like that, and it kind of worked. But you do need to put a little bit more effort. You need to be screen sharing and getting your maps drawn and show all that sort of stuff. But I'm keen to know, I mean, how difficult was it for you to sort of adapt as a person who would go around somewhere and do the whole thing to then having to do it online?
I will say I had not really been. I run many online games prior to the quarantine, but really hadn't expanded my business into digital games yet, and was kind of forced to at least give this a try very early on in the quarantine. So I was kind of reaching out to my groups that I already had, and they were converting over to digital games. I again kind of had experience with doing it a little bit, but I definitely, first of all, I'll say this: I do feel a lot of the, what I bring is me kind of showing up with the backpack and the big, maps and everything, and the bag of miniatures and stuff. And I knew immediately, like, I want to make sure that this is still a good experience for people. And as you're pointing out, it is a very, when you realize you don't necessarily need the miniatures, you don't necessarily need the map, you can play D&D over Zoom with just a virtual dice roller, and as long as people have their character sheets one way or another, and the character sheets I used were digitally accessible for sure, even the pre-constructed ones I kind of use with my one-shot groups and things like that. So in that sense, converting over was definitely very easy. And by, within a week, I had all my games, neat and tidy, kind of running online. And I will continue to definitely run online games as a huge part, if not the sole part of my game running business going forward, for sure. Obviously, the circumstances have kind of necessitated that. And at this point, it's a good shift. I like what's going on so far. I do think the biggest hurdle that I ran into, considering that if I really wanted to use maps and miniatures, there's programs like Roll20 that I can and do use to kind of facilitate all of the missing elements of D&D. There's really nothing that I could do physically that I can't now do virtually if I'm willing to put in a little more, maybe extra prep time than I otherwise would have to. So it's been pretty easy, but I think the thing that I run into the most as a problem is something that I think everybody is running into right now. Anyone who does their work via long distance calls and Zoom and things like this, it just feels different compared to being in person. And there's something about D&D that, compared to, online gaming, a lot of the appeal was this kind of feeling that we're all in one place, we're all looking at the same thing together, we're sharing the snacks, we're splitting a pizza, people are drinking a beer, and like it's I think all the different ways that communication is more difficult, the way people can kind of sometimes trip over each other, the way there'll be an awkward pause, and it's like, oh, sorry, like, what are we doing? Like, did somebody who wanted to talk? I thought somebody wanted to talk, and it's just the way socializing is just a little more difficult. It's just a little more difficult in all my games, and that's something where I think everybody's coming away from their calls and stuff a little more like, ooh, I hope that went well. It's kind of like the moment of, instead of getting to play out the aftermath of a game or recap or debrief, for lack of a better term, everybody just logs off their calls and you're looking at an empty room. And so again, I think it's something more universal than just D&D, but it's the kind of thing of how socializing is more difficult. I think D&D is more, that's the biggest barrier I run into, is the way socializing in general is just more difficult during these times.
Yeah, no, I think it is just a really sort of strange time and situation. I mean, sort of with the benefit of hindsight, it's like, if you could go back to January and buy shares in Zoom or something, you'd be a very rich person, I think, after the base of it. But it is interesting to see how many people have
100%.
have actually sort of quickly adapted to it. Like you say, like moving to your D&Ds online, and even now filmmakers. I don't know if you've seen Host. It's a horror film. It's on Shudder. It's like an hour-long film. It's about a group of friends who do a seance online, and it quickly goes wrong and stuff like that. You've now got filmmakers who are now making films. They can't go out and shoot, so they're now creating their own stuff. It's interesting how people are using, the restrictions they've got, but then finding new avenues and able to do it and stuff like that. And that's always interesting. But I think, I think nothing will beat that sort of social sort of thing of just being around the table and sort of being able to do it. And I mean, here in sort of Scotland and stuff, we're slowly sort of getting out of it. But I mean, like in New York, how is everything over there at the moment? Because New York's like my favorite city in the world. I've been over like 10 times in 10 years or something, and I'm desperate to get back whenever we're allowed back over. But yeah, I mean, how are things over there at the moment?
Well, I'm in Brooklyn, so definitely just kind of staying inside right now. Haven't really been using like avoiding public transportation, and everything. Obviously, just kind of staying inside or staying with people who I know, and running the digital games, as it were. But definitely takes its toll. I think everybody's kind of dealing with it, and I'll say for my games, that's definitely the thing. It's kind of like I know I'm providing something of immense relief for people. I've never felt more valued than right now when people uh, know that socializing is at such a premium, but at the same time, I probably never put more pressure on myself to make sure that what I'm providing is something that is giving people what they want and need in these difficult times. And I'm not running 100%. Nobody is, so it's kind of recognizing when to put that pressure on myself and when to maybe ease up and recognize that I'm in the same kind of cauldron, as it were, that everybody else is simmering in, and we all have to give ourselves some breaks right now.
Yeah, because I guess yeah, because I mean we're in the UK. We're finally getting back to the cinema tomorrow. Cinemas are reopening for Tenet, and I've always seen the cinema as what is sort of my sort of escape. I like to go watch a movie, switch off from everything. It's difficult to do at home because you've got Netflix on, but your phone's there, or there's so many
Yeah.
distractions. But I guess that's what you're providing at the moment with these D&D sessions, is a chance for people to escape into another world and just forget about what's going on out the window and just yeah, do that kind of thing. Yeah.
I don't know how many sessions I've started now during the pandemic where it's like literally that. It's like it'll be nice to jump into a fantasy world for a little while. And I was just thinking yesterday how much I miss being in a movie theater in like a nice, quiet space where it's like just one thing to do. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And so it's, I guess, talking about movies and stuff, I guess it's a nice segue sort of to talking about the Green
Totally.
Knight again and
Yes, yeah.
stuff. And I'm keen to know, I mean, when did A24 first contact you? I mean, were you aware of the company at that point? Were you a fan of their films and stuff?
So funnily enough, I was a fan of their stuff without really much of an idea of like who, the not the well known reputation is what I want to say of A24. As soon as I mentioned them to my sister, she is very into films. She always like kind of watches all the Oscar movies beforehand, and she was immediately like, "Wait a minute, A24!" And I had been following their stuff without even knowing it. I had just watched Midsommar fairly recently, and to be fair, I hadn't seen The Lighthouse until after they reached out to me, but it had been on my list. So there were quite a few of their movies that I had been kind of aware of. And I guess as soon as I realized, oh, you've done all of these, the pattern became very clear. I'm like, yeah, I like all the stuff that you're doing for sure. When they reached out to me, I didn't know about the Green Knight yet. I don't think there had been much information released on it yet, besides just like I think the teasers had maybe dropped that day, possibly, when they reached out to me, or were dropping that week. But it was before really there was any information about them that I was on my radar. And when they reached out to me saying that this is pertaining to a new movie that we're creating called The Green Knight, my initial assumption was, oh no, they think I know a lot more about Arthurian mythology than I really do. And I kind of felt like, okay, I mean, I took classes going back into college just on medieval literature and stuff like that. But at the same time, I'm like, well, they definitely have people involved in the movie already who are going to be at least, if not much more knowledgeable than me. So I wasn't sure exactly what they were reaching out for. But then when they told me that they wanted to create a game, I was so excited, because at that point, then they showed me the trailer and everything. But already before I saw the trailer, I was like, well, the idea of this myth, the Green Knight myth, which in many ways is the archetypal myth. When you say quest, there, quest of the Holy Grail, there's many quests, but the Green Knight is in many ways the archetype of the solo quest, and of the quest as very overt allegory. Like, it's very on the nose how the Green Knight myth is asking you to think about myths. Going back to the original story that was being told, it was this idea about, as we tell the story of this hero's myth, what does it mean to be a hero? What does it mean to go on a quest? What does it mean to have a myth about you? And to me, it has always been one of the coolest pieces of Arthurian literature for that reason. And so such a staple, in the way that Gilgamesh is famous because of it's old, but also talks about these very universal ideas. The Green Knight, I think, kind of holds that same title in many ways, I think. And so when they said they wanted to make a game about it, I'm like, ooh, that's very good. That's like making a game about the Odyssey. It's almost like a softball pitch. I like already it's starting to like pan out before my eyes. Yeah.
I mean, do you know how they found you to contact you about the game? Was it just through? Was there someone who'd maybe attended one of your games or was aware of it?
I don't think they had experience firsthand with any of my games or anything. They were aware through reputation, through a lot of the media that had come out about me. And I know that they had gotten a chance to look at my website. So they had some familiarity with my work for sure. They knew that I had, published some things in the past and that I was still running games and designing games. So I think it was kind of a lot of different things and kind of following, I guess, a little bit of the media trail that I had kind of left behind that I think brought them into touch with me. So somebody obviously in A24 got very interested in, I think, this idea of creating a tabletop game based on the Green Knight, and they were already working with other companies at this point. So I think they were just thinking, we want to make sure that we have somebody who has experience with tabletop game design that is able to like speak to what we're creating here, as it were.
Yeah, because I mean, the A24 shop is almost as legendary as the A24 films. I mean, you've got it's almost like it seems like it's marketed to like film hipsters who will not, care about dropping $60 on a scented candle just because it has A24 in it and stuff like that. But I mean, some of their marketing is great. It's like the Midsummer Bear in a Cage sort of decorative ornament that they had, which sold out when Uncut Gems came out. They were doing basketballs and the gold Furbies and stuff. It's like anytime like a film comes out, you're thinking, okay, what are they going to be able to market out of that? And as soon as they dropped this on the website saying they were doing an RPG, and I was like, well, Lee, who co-hosts the podcast with me, says, are you buying this? And I'm like, it's already done, ordered. Yep, I've already got it and stuff like that. So I was really excited to
100%.
see what was doing it. And so I mean, in terms of like designing the game, I mean, how much? I mean, we don't want any spoilers on the podcast because obviously the film hasn't come out yet. But have you seen? Did they let you see any of the Green Knight? Were there any discussions with the director David Lowery, or or was it more sort of keeping with the sort of legend? Because sort of reading the game and stuff, it seems from what I've seen of the trailer and stuff that it does follow the narrative of the film.
So I did, yes, get to see an early cut version of the Green Knight movie, kind of shortly after we can confirm the work that I was going to be doing with them. So I did get a chance to see, like, in what ways were they holding true to the myth, which is pretty substantial. I was actually very impressed that they didn't feel the need to diverge more, but at the same time, I got very excited because without any spoilers, I do believe that it would be fair to say, expanded upon the universe of the Green Knight. And to me, that is something that makes it so much easier to build an RPG around not just a story, not just a movie, but the world that this movie suggests. And so once I knew, like, oh, I felt strongly like they included everything from the myth and then built upon the implications of the myth with their own implications about this universe. And I think that's what makes RPGs so great, is the idea of implications that the game master can kind of take and then tell their own stories with. So if it's just a little hint about, like, well, there could be a whole bunch of like this type of monster somewhere in this version of England, in this mythos, then I'm like, I watched that movie and I was like, this is perfect. There's so many different stories you can tell here. And I knew that as you're kind of highlighting the story that I wanted characters to go through in this game, I want it to be complementary to the film, where no matter which order you see them in, one won't necessarily spoil the other, but at the same time, if you do both, you'll see correspondences, you'll see fun little nods to the other, and I think they reinforce each other without either one spoiling the other one, because there's just different series of events that play out that nonetheless pay, for lack of a better term, maybe homage to the film, as it were. So you can even be the game master, read through the whole game, and still not necessarily spoil the movie for yourself. But I think if you experience both, you're going to enjoy them both even more.
Excellent. And so, I mean, in terms of like producing the game and writing, I mean, so how long did that take, sort of from start to finish?
That process. So what I'll say is for RPG production, I thought they did a great job of keeping everything moving, and we for an RPG I think produced this very quickly, given the amount of time. I'm happy to say that there were some very obvious mechanics that once they emerged, I was like, oh, this is what the game is going to be about. So we managed to iron out the core mechanics very quickly. I think quicker than most RPGs would be fortunate enough to manage to do so. And so we were able to move to the production stages very quickly. And I think we had the whole thing done within certainly 5 months, I'll say. Definitely. No, it would be under four, probably 3 months, I think, from the start of production to definitely 4 months if we're including the actual like production of creating the product. So roughly 4 months, let's say.
Okay, I guess maybe at that point you were maybe they were working towards a deadline of maybe the film I think was originally meant to maybe be released sort of like end of May, June. So I guess you were probably working to that sort of deadline, and then of course everything shifts and whatever. But by that point, the ball's already rolling to such a stage that you still have to get it done by that point.
We originally had a lot of plans for South by Southwest for the release of the movie, and previews of the movie and the game. So unfortunately, things did get kind of moved around a little bit. But if anything, it gave us more time to design the game, which definitely wouldn't have been ready by Southwest in a final form of any kind. So it kind of gave us some flexibility. As the movie's release date did get pushed back, we were able to kind of more appropriately kind of push it into more of a release concert with the movie, as it were.
Oh, okay, cool. And in terms of sort of the design and stuff, I guess you're writing it, but I mean, did you have to sort of test it out, and were there like several sessions where you basically sort of went through the game with a few people, got feedback to sort of fine tune everything?
Absolutely, I ran it through with quite a few groups as much as I could in the kind of time frame we were creating the game in. But I'm lucky that I have access to so many different players, because while I didn't run it with my professional groups, I have a lot of friends and family who are willing to kind of jump into this with me and test out. That ultimately, what's nice is even in the first few playthroughs, the mechanics were largely sound right away, and I consider myself lucky in that regard, but also probably a lot of my experience running, especially for new players. I knew I wanted to make something that was simple enough, and I knew how to go about simple game design in that respect, but that would kind of spiral out into complex combinations of mechanics that people would have a lot of fun with. So ultimately, even the first playtest, all we were really doing was balancing, because I had kept the mechanics simple enough and managed to kind of intuit a lot of the numbers right away that we would need to factor in. So by the time we were playtesting, was just kind of working out the balance and the kinks, as it were. And by the time we were doing the final playtests, it was fun, like getting to the final battles, as it were, and seeing how those played out, but also seeing how different groups along the way made radically different choices. I like to think that in my playtests, I saw a lot of the combinations of the core adventure kind of play out, and it was so fun seeing how in a fairly short amount of gameplay you would get to see so many different possibilities play out. That's why I think that while you might, like any D&D adventure or any RPG adventure, you wouldn't necessarily want to run the same thing with the same group, but as a game master, you could run it for different groups who didn't know how the things were going to play out. You'd see very different results and have a lot of fun. Yeah.
Excellent. And there's a few sort of surprises, I think it's fair to say, that can take place. I have to say, I loved the final page of the book. I've sort of teased it to my co-host, but I haven't gone into it in case we decide to play it, because I think there's some fabulous surprises in store for anyone, fans of A24, especially for films from the last sort of year. I mean, the titles are just great, and you can sort of see where it's going to go and how you can sort of weave things in there. I mean, this part, was this all you, or did A24 want something like this, or did you sort of pitch this idea of, wouldn't it be cool if we sort of weaved elements of the wider A24 universe into this.
Absolutely. The kind of A24 challenges that you're referring to in the back were definitely suggested by them, but the moment they made the suggestion, I was kind of like struck by it because it's so obvious and such a good idea, because this is what beginner boxes and starter sets do all the time, is give little hints, little seeds of how could you expand beyond this adventure with the rules that we've given you, and why wouldn't they be, built around all these, popular movies, as it were. One of the number one questions that I have been getting is, will there be a Midsommar RPG? And all I'll say is that if you are interested in that, definitely pick up the Green Knight RPG. And who knows what might happen, might get released in the future, but I think it might give you what you need for sure. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, it's funny that I sort of read the title of one, which was called The Black Opal, because it sort of reminded me of there's a Parks and Rec. Are you a fan of Parks and Rec?
Yes,
the Cones of Dunshire. Yeah, where Ben Wyatt is on sabbatical and basically decides to create his own role playing game and stuff, and then it turns out to become really famous.
It's all about the cones.
It's all about the cones, and I was very bored at the beginning of lockdown, and I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see that. This, by the way, is kind of an aside. Anyone who's sort of listening to this podcast, they're not really know what I'm doing, but I spent time creating a Uncut Gems board game, which is kind of inspired,
board game,
yes, by Monopoly, in that you basically are going around. Yeah, you sort of go around and basically are trying to get enough money to place the final bet, but you can either, anytime you go on like a bet, you can either lose or win, just depending on if it's a stupid bet or not. And you're basically trying to get all this money to get round. And every time you go around the board, the stakes increase. You have to bet more, or you lose more every time, and things like that. And I sort of came up with all these rules and these cards about different things that happen that relate to the movie. And it's just like, my wife was like, "What are you doing? Who's ever going to play this?" I'm like, "Well, I am, and I don't know." And it actually got, I put it up on Instagram and stuff, and the Safties actually tweeted and said it was really cool. So, I mean, I haven't heard from A24 yet if they want to go in production, but you never know. But that's the kind of thing that, I didn't. It's great that A24 is sort of inspiring these sort of things. I mean, they've got such passionate fans that do this kind of stuff, and it's great that they've got these sort of outlets where it's not just a movie now. You can sort of play the game, wear the T-shirt, smell the candle, and all this kind of stuff. So,
the experience, absolutely, yeah. And I think Monopoly is a great model for that movie as a game. Honestly, I think that's perfect. Shows how Monopoly is really about ultimately bets and stuff. So 100%, yeah. And love it.
So, I mean, now that the game is getting out there now. It's sort of just arrived in the UK this week when it was shipped, but I have seen that there's several people out in America who have it and playing it. Have you had any sort of feedback from anyone who's played the game yet?
People have been doing unboxing videos and have looked through, and I'm always impressed by people who are like, yeah, I got it earlier today, I've read all the rules, and I'm like, damn, like that's good, that's like impressive. I love and I like to think that is a statement to the game, that especially if you are familiar with RPGs already, but even if you're not, this is just a matter of cracking it open, and it should be just as easy to pick up as a fairly simple board game. I don't want people to feel like, compared to other RPGs, even especially in some ways D&D, that can be rather rule heavy, that are like, oh, it's easy, just this 250-page rule book, and it's like, okay, well, thanks, but I'd rather learn from my friend, ideally. And if you are that friend, I think it's going to be really easy for you to pick up. But I have seen people doing unboxing videos and talking about the rules, and those are always nice videos because people seem genuinely like really excited about the rule set. I tried to do something that was going to be really fun and approachable, but not feel gimmicky. I wanted it to feel like a real RPG where you're making real good choices, and the rules focus on this kind of aspect of moral decision making. You don't get bogged down in the rules of like, how does a longsword work versus a halberd? It's like the mechanics are simple, but the rules lend themselves to this really fun kind of interpersonal, not morality, but ethics, let's say, based decision making, where everything comes down to, is your decision honorable honorable or not. And as you make honorable or dishonorable decisions, you are slipping towards one extreme or the other, and the risks and advantages that come with that kind of. And so everything's kind of a strategic decision, but it's strategic about what do you choose to do, and do you have all the information to make the honorable decision that you might want to make.
Yeah, because I guess it's all going to come down to the people who are playing it. Because I guess you're going to have people who are going to be like very cautious and go, "Oh no, come on, guys, let's figure this out." We don't want to go. And then you're going to have the Warcraft Leroy Jenkins guys who just bomb down and go, "I'm going to fight everyone." It's like, no, we don't want to do that. And then you're going to get arguments because I guess it's
Absolutely.
better when you've got a mixture of those kinds of people sort of playing, isn't it, rather than everyone who's exactly the same.
That's what I would say is you will have the most fun in this game if you have a variety of players. And in my experience, that's most D&D groups. And sometimes it's funny to me when some D&D groups don't get along for that reason, because it's like, well, I think different play styles are what make these games so much fun and honoring, and kind of honorating or suffering through, or tolerating, maybe for lack of a better term, those other play styles is what makes the gameplay of tabletop role-playing games so exciting and fun and dynamic. So I was really excited that it seemed like this game really almost took that sort of interplay of like, well, I want to explore the cave because I'm brave. Well, I want to look into the cave because I'm careful, and then take those decisions and make that what the game is about. Really focus on that, because to me, I think that's where a lot of the fun of the role playing emerges from, is when people have different ideas on what to do next and discuss it, but also have like vested interests in some degree through strategy and mechanics and making certain decisions and standing by certain decisions. So it was really cool, I'll say, to see the videos where people really were like getting the rules and excited to play through the rules because they were getting the implications of what they would mean. It's like, oh, you could go down and be like, oh, I want to be dishonorable, because the more dishonorable I am, the easier it is to do dishonorable things. And as long as I don't, fall too far into dishonor, I'll actually be it's a really good strategy. And like kind of going in different directions, but being forced to cooperate to some degree in the same group. I haven't seen any videos of people or heard feedback of people who have played it necessarily yet, but I imagine in the next few weeks even that'll be emerging pretty soon.
Do you know if A24 have sent like the cast and crew any versions of the game? Are they planning on setting up like a live stream of the cast playing it or something in order to promote the film? Will you be the
So
the
that's
the, the game master on that as well?
it's something we've definitely been discussing, and one way or another, what I definitely am, we're hoping to put together is maybe videos, it's something that will be instructional in some capacity. But the ideal situation, and we almost had it for South by Southwest, but at some point, who knows what the future might hold. And if we can get the cast, or anyone together in some capacity to play the game, I think that would be really fun to do. And I've put together some, RPG media in the past, so anything's possible is what I'll say.
Absolutely. And sort of in terms of like your favorite A24 films, is there any particular ones that stand out? And if so, are there other ones that are ripe for adaptation? Just off the top of my head, I certainly know maybe like if you're going down like a single sort of route of like honor or dishonor, something like The Witch might be if a great one to adapt in terms of whether you want to be wicked or good or something like that. Avoid the temptation of Black Phillip or something like that could be quite a fun one to do.
I would say for my favorite A24 film, it's very hard to argue with Midsommar. Midsommar just swept me off my feet. I thought that was like, I'm a big fan of the Call of Cthulhu RPG and kind of the H.P. Lovecraft, like Lovecraftian realm, the Cthulhu mythos, for a lack of a better term. And so I'm always very interested in that kind of way of telling a horror story where you are interplaying with the idea of what is normal and what is weird, and what do those definitions mean. And I thought Midsommar to me not having any actual elder gods or alien stuff or anything supernatural, Midsommar to me is the best Cthulhu mythos story because it's like got everything. It's got the idea of like, well, these people can't be bad, right? It's like, and then it's like, well, that's just their beliefs. There's no actual Horror God, right? And down to the very final moments of the movie, you don't know. You don't know what's real, and that to me makes it the most successful Cthulhu mythos story I've ever seen told in cinema. I think it is my favorite horror movie probably at this point. But in terms of adaptations, as good as Midsommar would be as like a Cthulhu story, where it's like, figure out what this. Obviously, the only problem is it's so sketchy. The moment like you would walk in and just be like, I don't like these people. But I think it would be really fun as a mystery horror story. But at the same time, The Lighthouse, in terms of adaptations, I couldn't watch that movie without being like, ugh, a two-player RPG where it's two people trying to figure out who is the one living in a fantasy world and whose past and reality is the real one, and it's competitive. Like whoever wins, their reality is the true one and the other person was delusional. Like, and maybe that's not even the point. Maybe it's like some collaborative effort to both preserve your sanity against this ominous light that is driving you both mad. I don't, and the only issue is who's the survivor. But I think there's a great deal of potential in all A24 films for potential RPGs. But I definitely couldn't stop thinking about with The Lighthouse how good an RPG setting and situation that would have made. Nice contained environment and everything. Yeah.
Excellent. And in terms of like people who are sort of on lockdown, they're listening to this podcast, they've got the Green Knight game or something, and they're wondering, what's the best way to start sort of playing RPGs, because you've got this starter pack. I mean, me and my group, we start with the Stranger Things D&D set as well. I mean, what would you recommend to people for the best way to sort of go about getting into role-playing games?
Absolutely. I'd love to say that the Green Knight game I think is so approachable that if you've never played RPGs before, this would be a great game to start with. So whether you're experienced with RPGs or not, this game and specifically the starter set is I think one of the perfect places to start with. I think lots of RPGs out there have good beginner boxes, and Dungeons and Dragons is a well-known RPG and they have a great beginner box, but I think even the beginner box of a game like Dungeons and Dragons, which I love D&D, but it's not a rules light game, I would say. D&D manages to make its beginner box approachable, and I think if you're going to start in Dungeons and Dragons, you definitely want to start with the beginner box if you don't have much experience, especially not a lot of experience game mastering. But I would think that games like Dungeons and Dragons can be approachable, but I think games like the Green Knight are great places to start. And if I'm being honest, probably games like Call of Cthulhu in some ways are a little bit easier than Dungeons and Dragons. So the starter sets for a game like Call of Cthulhu might be a more approachable place to start with role-playing games. I always say look around online, see what catches your eye. People who haven't played role-playing games before who want to get started, focus on like what stories are you interested in. There's so many different RPGs out there. There's Star Wars RPGs, there's mystery RPGs, there's RPGs for any genre or tone or style of gameplay. And so Dungeons and Dragons has the advantage of being well known and having a lot of support, so you'll be able to find a lot of people out there with a lot of resources. I'll say that. A game like the Green Knight is going to be simple enough that, like any board game, if you feel confident to be able to pick up Monopoly and teach it to your friends, then I think you'll have no problem with the Green Knight game and teaching it to your friends. Other than that, I think that the easiest way, probably, if you're looking to get into RPGs, is besides beginner boxes, finding a friend who can maybe help introduce you into that world. And if you can't find a professional game master, and if you don't have any friends on hand who are trying to get you into D&D, obviously, board game cafes and social spaces are a difficult place to go to right now, but the virtual equivalents of those, places like Discord, the Roll20 website has a vast community of people who are looking to start a variety of different RPGs, and those are great places to look online for your community, kind of.
Excellent. And if people wanted yourself to help introduce them into the world, where's the best place for them to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. If they go to timmwoods.com, that's TIMM woods.com, that is my website and the easiest way to get in touch with me about interest in getting a game started for a special event or a long-term game. It would just be to email me through there. Obviously, I have social media on Twitter, Instagram, and I can be reached via all of those, but I most reliably do my booking through email. So if you have any trouble reaching out to me, that's the best way.
Excellent. And I guess with the physical meetups, it was all basically all sort of done around New York. I guess with the move to Zoom, have you got any international clients yet?
Actually, I mean, I have games in different time zones now, which I always thought would be an exciting thing to be like kind of able to book it, because so many adults just want to play the games in that like 7 to 10 o'clock block in the evening. So getting other adult games going at different time periods has been great. I run games for a lot of people in California and the Midwest now, but I don't. Well, and so I do technically have international games because in one of the games where the majority of people are either in California or Arizona, I know at least one of the players is in Italy right now. I want to say either Italy or Germany. I'm not 100% sure on that, but he is somewhere in Europe right now, and he is definitely our international player at the moment. But I think right now that might be one of my only players outside of the United States right now. I've definitely had people outside the United States before for like one shots and stuff, but mostly just different parts of the United States now.
Excellent. Well, I'm sure you'll probably get a few people in the UK. I know a few people have ordered the game and it's arrived, so you might be getting some business out
For
of that.
sure, very exciting, absolutely.
But it's been an absolute pleasure, Tim, speaking to you about the Green Knight, and I can't wait to see what you might be able to do next for A24.
Very exciting. I hope more, definitely.